Good morning, and thank you for standing by. All participants will be able to listen only until the question and answer session. This conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Leland Milstein. You may begin.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for attending today's edition of the Thursday webcast series. The Thursday webcast series is a bi-monthly webcast held at the lunch hour. The trainings leverage local successes by amplifying to a larger audience two model organizations, methods, materials, and approaches. Sessions are planned to last no more than 1 hour, with two presenters speaking on the same topic from slightly different perspectives, each for 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. Today's session is approved by the ISA for 1 CEU hour and by SAF for 1 CFE Category 1. If you haven't already given me your certification number, please email me after the session so we make sure you can get your credit. Also, most state landscape architecture boards require only a certificate of completion, which ACT can provide to members who request one. So again, just email me after this session if you need one of those. This is a program of the Alliance for Community Trees. If you're not a member already, please consider joining. And I want to thank our sponsors for the webcast series, the Home Depot Foundation, and the USDA Forest Service. Today's session is Reaching Bilingual Audiences. Reaching across language barriers to build relationships with different constituencies in your community can be difficult, but likely your mission drives you in that direction. Being closed off to any segment of the community can adversely impact your volunteer corps, donations, broad reach, or even more basically, your ability to get trees in the ground and get the public better educated. Having a diverse base can bring new perspectives to your organization and can give you better information about what your community needs and how best to provide it. The more inclusive your organization is, the better equipped it will be to reach and help the greatest number of people. To tell us a little bit more about that today, we've got three great presenters actually, from two excellent organizations. We've got Doug Wildman and Greg Harrell Edge from Friends of the Urban Forest and Ashley Atkinson from the Greening of Detroit. First up today are Doug and Greg. Doug Wildman has been with Friends of the Urban Forest for nearly 11 years as program director and in an earlier life for 2 additional years as a planting manager. He has been practicing landscape architecture for over 20 years, focusing on community design, public spaces, and community gardens. Excited about the direction Fuss is heading with sidewalk gardens, Doug sees that San Francisco is clearly moving into a completely different look, where concrete may not be the default alongside curbsides, but instead beautiful, continuous sidewalk meadow understories connecting all the streets with the trees that have been planted by Fuss over the last several years. A licensed landscape architect, certified arborist, and certified urban forester, Doug enjoys volunteering through his participation on the board of directors of the California Urban Forest Council. Greg Harrell Edge, the community outreach manager at Friends of the Urban Forest, was a field organizer for the Obama campaign, responsible for 25 precincts in Seminole County, Florida. Prior to politics, Greg was a writer for ABC's late-night show, Jimmy Kimmel Live. Greg's a graduate of the University of Virginia, where he received a bachelor's in politics and U.S. government, and we are grateful and lucky to have Greg and Doug here to talk to us today. Take it away, guys.
Great. Thanks, Leland. Can you guys hear us okay?
Yep.
Yep, right on. I think the topic being bilingual audiences, Friends of the Urban Forest certainly is working in a city that's super diverse, with a huge Asian population of an incredible proportion in the city in different districts. Greg's going to speak to some of that and some recent projects that we're working on and some that we've done. But our organization has seen the need in our literature to have at least a little bit of translation provided. The outreach forms, let's see if I could scroll through this, Leland. There we go. Thanks for putting this together, Leland. This is great. We have planted a significant number of trees in districts like the Outer Sunset, and it is a whole neck of the woods that is populated by the Chinese Americans, and often the only English speakers are the second generation, the kids. And so the property owners can be tough to do the outreach with. We have to obviously get the property owner to sign off and get a tree. One of the, in 2000 we had a really successful offering of a speaker who is, you'll love his name, perhaps people know him, there are books written by him. His name is the Holiness Grandmaster, Professor Thomas Lin Yun, and he is of the Black Sect Tantric Buddhism, where he spoke about the feng shui of street trees. And forever we've said, oh, the Asian population doesn't want to plant trees because of feng shui. Well, once you understand it, and I think that's true of anyone understanding anything, you'll realize that there's plenty of space to plant street trees. And sometimes making sure the alignment not being in line with the front door, because that can prevent the good qi from flowing into your home. But actually, it could channel it if it's just off to the side. And should you actually move into a house that has a tree right in front, the blessings and the treatment of that tree, putting mirrors and flowers and leaves on it, is actually an increased and heightened method of bringing good qi into your home. So there are a lot of great things that Professor Thomas Lin presented back in 2000. We had about almost 300 people attending that. It was fully translated, and people gave offerings, little red envelopes to the guy, and it was super successful. The question is, did we plant more trees after that? I would say no. We planted a few trees in some of the Sunset District's streets, but I think what it did is brought in an awareness and set the groundwork for future tree planting. So not always does the event spur instant response, and I think that's important to keep in mind. We did the same talk 5 years later in 2005. We had a meager 15 people come, and the content wasn't on topic, and I think people were disappointed. So it's interesting, in 5 years, such a big change, but we tried it again. Let me change the slide because people are looking at the same thing, right? There we go. Currently we step in, and I want Greg to talk towards some of what we're doing, but we do have a mailbox that is currently just for Spanish speakers, and it turns over to one of our staff that checks that mailbox for people interested in trees or have questions in our Spanish speakers. Right now, we do not have a Chinese-speaking mailbox. We found it difficult to maintain it, even though it was infrequent that someone might, leave a message. Having a volunteer check it was kind of a challenge. We'd have to check up with a volunteer asking, did you check it this week, this month, this quarter? And so it wasn't attracting that much, it really didn't seem effective. Let me show some of the materials. Okay, so step into 2010, what we're doing, and Greg, do you want to talk to some of the outreach that we've done?
Sure. So one of the things, as a largely volunteer organization, our ability to do just about everything at the organization is dependent on what we can get in terms of volunteers. And so one of the things that we've been doing this year is doing outreach to try to get volunteers that can meet these demands for us. So we had a project that we're going to talk about in a little bit in Japantown that's actually in the process of coming together right now, and we were able to find a Japanese immersion student, college student, who has just been in the States for a couple of years and is doing a program where she's learned English and is coming over for an environmental science major, and then is going to go back to Japan and wanted to do an internship with us. So one of the things that we've done is pair people, do outreach to try to find volunteers that can handle a project and then give them that project. So as the Japantown project was starting to come up, she has basically taken on that project as her own, so that she's the main point of contact for a lot of the store owners in Japantown. I would say they recognize her as being the face of the project more than myself or other members of the organization, so that someone like her is just invaluable to us to be able to use her as a resource for the Japantown project. And so we've really done similar things. We had a group come. There was part of an organization called Volunteers in Asia. They were touring the United States for 6 weeks. They wanted to do one volunteer project with us. And it was, I think, 17 high school students who all spoke primarily Japanese, some Cantonese and Mandarin, and then varying levels of English. And so we paired them up into teams to make sure that they were in small teams that could cover every language, and designed a program in the outer, set up a project in the outer sunset to make use of this resource that we had. Another really good resource has been our local elected officials, where they're really the ones who, when we need something translated, they're the ones who you can really count on, who know the demographics of their, for the supervisors in particular, who know the demographics of their constituents, and so they've already, arranged for translators for every single one of the constituent bodies that they need to reach. So reaching out to them and having a good relationship with them, they're the ones who can tell you, you're going to need this in Russian, you're going to need this in Cantonese, Mandarin isn't as big of an issue, and they can actually help provide that. So the mayor's, the supervisor's offices have been really helpful as well, both in knowing what we're going to need and in being able to provide it. So one of the kind of main theme of what I've been trying to do is contact folks that would be able to fill that void for us, and then set up a project for them so that they're able to do that. So that instead of and to be more proactive about it. So instead of say have to do a planting in the outer sunset and then say, oh, well, what do we have in terms of resources? We try to find the resources and then set up the project. And so those are kind of the main themes of what we try to do in that regard. And so what we have in front of us right now is one of those translated flyers that someone from the mayor's office was able to provide. If you can scroll through. Do you have the next one, Leland? Oh, there it goes.
Go back. This is our door hanger.
And that was in Spanish?
Spanish and Chinese, but let me go. This is just this one.
Right, and so that's just when we take down people's information as being interested. So that's when they actually give us their information as possibly being interested in participating. And so you need all of the materials that you would use, both in telling people about the project and being able to take their information away.
There's also just in general education that's really important. We found that having a Spanish only pruning workshop was fantastic. We've done it a few times with the help of Bartlett Tree Company, where we had put out outreach to companies that work on trees and went through actual pruning of trees. And so this is about a 3-hour workshop, physical on the streets, pruning young street trees about 3 years old. So we need to start doing that again. I think it's important that those people touching trees are fully aware of the best practices. So outreach consists of many different ways through education. And this was done some time ago. Remember the National Tree Trust? All right. And we prune our trees at scheduled dates, 18 months after planting and 3 years, and leaving this door hanger. And there is information on leaving, if you're a Spanish speaker, using our mailbox. And currently, like I said, we don't have a Chinese mailbox, voice mailbox to check. But I think maybe we could get some help from the mayor's office again, or supervisors to periodically check that.
But one kind of last major theme that I would touch upon that actually took us a long time to really kind of finalize and realize is that all of our initial multilingual outreach was largely tied to ways to communicate our current message and bring in other populations to the program that we already have. So to say, you know, we're going to be doing a tree pruning workshop, can we put out materials in Spanish and bring people there and have a translator? And one of the most successful things that we've done, I think, is to realize that sometimes it's more helpful to make a mirror version of the same project. So to have a tree pruning workshop that's entirely in Spanish, that's branded as such, where you can do outreach about that, so that it doesn't feel like it's an add-on to something that's already existing, but that you're putting in the same amount of resources, but having it separate makes it feel like it's more of a substantial commitment by the organization, and that's really one of the biggest differences that we've noticed. The feng shui seminar that we had, the tree pruning workshop in Spanish, the having plantings in the outer sunset that are really driven by Chinese outreach. That's been the stuff where we've gotten kind of the most feedback is where we've separated it and had kind of a mirror program when we can.
And adding to that, I think some of our best outreach is simply doing what we do. When we plant trees at a school and the parents come out, they get to see who we are. The kids are engaged, excited about it, talk about it. So our name gets out there and begins to plant the seed that street trees are important and school plantings. And my goodness, the diversity in our schools is amazing. We had a huge planting at a public school. And so it works great. Kids are a fantastic way for education. This is our just our mission statement at Friends of the Urban Forest. And then you go into it, and there's the Chinese page with information. We did, so here's another historic tidbit. We did have a board member that was deep in the Chinese community of finance, where he has a radio show, a weekly radio show, where one of the topics for his radio hour was the value of street trees and your property. So we had, about a half an hour talk time where he translated and questions came in, and it was pretty good outreach. It did add to the planting, I want to say by maybe 7 trees. No, actually 13 trees. 13 new forms came in right after that radio show. So that was kind of a neat way. So if you have someone on your board of directors maybe that's in whatever community that you're working to provide outreach to, they might have a mechanism to do that. What else? Yeah, so school plantings, that's what I was mentioning. And Greg's name's not on here, but he's been a fantastic adder, having someone that really knows how to do outreach. We've always had people that just love trees and do outreach, just thinking about that, but think about how best to work with communities. Greg's been a fantastic, help here at Friends of the Urban Forest. So I'm glad you're here.
Do we open up to questions after each segment, or do we just pass it up to Ashley?
Oh, actually, we're going to do that right now. Thanks to Doug and Greg. Greg, sorry that we don't have your contact info up there on the slide, but when we put out our resource list with a bunch of related information, success stories for people, we'll be sure to put your contact on there so that people can bother you with questions and learn about the programs that you've got.
And I just thought it was a really cool opportunity this morning, so I kind of glommed on at the last minute, but yeah, I think it's a really cool thing.
I'm glad you did. Thanks very much. Kathy, let's open up the line for questions.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and be sure to record your first and last name. To withdraw the question, you may press *2. Once again, *1 if you would like to ask a question.
And I want to remind folks as people are coming up with their questions and dialing in that if you are public speaking averse, you can also type in your question over the internet. If you just click on that Q&A tab at the top of the screen, you can type your question in, and I will read it out for you. Also, Doug mentioned this, and I think he's quite right. It would be great to hear from other people, even if you don't have a question, but you have a comment and you want to just talk a little bit about how you have handled reaching out to bilingual parts of your community. We'd love to hear about that, and we can just share some good ideas. So while people are coming up with their questions, I just wanted to ask you guys first. I thought it was, you had lots of really great suggestions, especially getting in touch with local elected officials because they know exactly what languages you need to learn or to translate into for whatever neighborhood you want to work in. When you were talking about the Japantown project and sort of how you had one cheerleader who was the face of the project and was a member of the Japanese community, do you think that's necessary? And if so, how do you go about getting someone who sort of comes to you as a volunteer and is willing to work on your behalf to further the cause without your staff being directly involved?
I don't know if I would say that it's necessary, but it has been almost invaluable having Yoko's help on that project. She actually just giving us a presence where, because we've had to show up to a lot of business association meetings in the Japantown and things like that, and so just having her there to be able to, there have been some people at those, even at the meetings, that haven't spoken English. Having someone from our organization that can, instead of going through a third party, can kind of express directly what's going on with the project and interact, both in terms of just the logistics and giving us credibility in the neighborhood. And then her ability to actually go business by business and kind of bring information to those actual mom and pop store owners that are going to be, having trees out front. Again, it's one of those things where I can show up with something that's translated, but the ability to actually converse about the project, answer questions, it just gives us a completely different face in interacting with folks. And so we've been lucky so far in that Yoko, actually, the timing was just incredible. She contacted us out of the blue a few months, right around the time that the early conversations about that project were happening. And that's actually happened twice where we've gotten pretty lucky in that regard. But in both of those cases, I've gotten information from the individuals about the program that they're from, so that when we go back the next time, I'm able to reach out to the program that Yoko has been from and just kind of test the waters as to whether or not they have anybody that's environmentally inclined and things like that. So we've actually gotten really lucky in those regards, but also kind of that's helped build a foundation that hopefully we can do in the future.
Excellent. Great question came in over the internet. Do you find that internet or email is effective for reaching bilingual audiences? I think you just sort of started to mention the importance of human interaction, but what's your experience been with that?
We haven't directly sent translated materials.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is the times that we've had someone who can do outreach, it's been really helpful that they're there, and being able to, one thing that I always believe about outreach is being able to talk to someone face-to-face is the most valuable thing. Being able to talk to someone over the phone is kind of the second priority, and being able to email back and forth would be the third one. But actually, in regards to specific different language outreach, we actually had someone who was trying to send an email recently because we wanted to reach something like 20 people at once, and we couldn't. It's actually really difficult to do the actual Chinese characters. It took longer to figure out how to. We just didn't have the software. I thought it was going to be something that was really easy to do, just that you could Google it and find it. It was actually easier to just do the more effective thing and go through and call people and leave voicemails and talk to folks than we had luck in actually writing the emails. That turned out to be the least effective thing, turned out to be the hardest thing for us to do. And so, I can't really speak much to it other than that one attempt, but I was really surprised that it was really difficult to do, even for our native Mandarin speaker.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions on the line?
I show no questions on the phone line.
Okay, great.
There's a second portion of that is, how do you know when you're dropping out flyers at a house what language to, leave behind? And I think you really don't. Many of the door hangers are two-sided, and the front side may be English and the back side could be split with Chinese Spanish. We've done that before. Not as much information perhaps, but a lead to a web page or to a phone number to leave a message if you're interested in getting a tree. So it's buckshot. The flyers tend to have both. Sometimes you might assume that the property is maybe Chinese. You might see a mirror on the door, but generally they're combined flyers.
That's great. Actually, that was another question that someone had typed in, so you answered it even before I could ask. Clearly, it's something that people want to know about. And I know you mentioned this. I think Ashley's going to be able to talk a little bit about this as well, but using children as translators and community connectors, has that, I know you said that it's been a great way through the school programs to get the kids to start educating their parents who maybe aren't bilingual. What's your experience been with that?
I think it's hard to find a direct correlation after an event. Greg, do you have a sense maybe from the Western Addition planting, because that was a good one?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that our school outreach has been particularly linked to our multicultural outreach in any substantive way. But it is interesting, and Doug kind of mentioned this, just from the kind of pure reality of it, there are a lot more younger bilingual speakers, second generation or just multilingual speakers than there are, in a lot of cases, older. And so it's one of those things where it just winds up being that the people who have both the energy and ability to do a lot of the kind of multicultural outreach for us have been, that high school group that we use. Even sometimes when we're in a neighborhood and we get someone who doesn't speak a language, that we brought something, that we were prepared and brought something with. If there's someone who speaks Tagalog and we don't have anything in Tagalog that day, they often default to saying, hang on, let me go get my son. And so you wind up kind of explaining the project to an 8-year-old who then turns around and explains it to their parents. So I think, whether it's more effective or not, you just wind up talking to a younger generation often when you're doing multicultural outreach.
I think that's great. Kathy, do we have any other questions on the line?
None at this time, but once again, it is *1.
Okay, well, I think in that case, we'll move along to Ashley, but I want folks to keep these questions and these topics in mind, because I think after Ashley goes, we'd love to hear your perspectives and your experience reaching out to bilingual groups in your area, and whether it's the same as or different from what Doug and Greg have been talking about. We'd love to hear your comments. So next up, we have Ashley Atkinson from the Greening of Detroit. Ashley is the Director of Project Development and Director of Urban Agriculture at the Greening of Detroit. She has worked in the field of community gardening, urban greening, and vacant land reuse for over 10 years. First in Flint, where she co-founded the Flint Urban Gardening and Land Use Corporation, then as Director of the Detroit Agriculture Network, and currently with Greening of Detroit, where she works with community groups to plant trees, community gardens, and other green space in Detroit. Ashley is a graduate of both Michigan State University and the University of Michigan, where she studied international development, community organization, and environmental land use planning. Thanks for being with us yet again today, Ashley.
Thank you, Leland. It's great to be with you. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about our organization. The Greening of Detroit is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, and much like my co-presenters, we really focus on planting trees in public right-of-ways and public spaces around our city. In fact, we plant thousands of trees every year, principally between the sidewalk and street in front of homes, but also in public parks and on school grounds. And we have, with that, worked very, very similar outreach tools and outreach and training events as the Friends of the Urban Forest. And I guess I'm going to talk a little bit more about in depth about a project that we work on and we've worked on for the last 6 or 7 years, the Romanowski Farm Park. But before I get into that, I'll talk to you a little bit about how our organization evolved over the last 20 years to really encompass more than trees. So although our work is best known for forestry, we also do a lot of workforce development, educational programs, open space planning and projects, and then agricultural programs. And that evolution really happened because while we were out in the streets planting trees and really trying to do great community engagement and outreach, it turned out that a lot of Detroiters weren't as obsessed about trees in the urban forest as we were, and in fact, many had had other major concerns having to deal with, unemployment, the school system and education for their children. I mean, the things that we're all really concerned about, and if they were in fact concerned about the urban environment, a lot of times it had to do with things like the water quality, or the soil that their kids were playing in, or the food and food access that they had to in the city. So the organization from forestry really began to develop expertise in really all of those areas, and we now have 5 major departments doing that work. And my particular role at the organization is I'm the director of project development as well as urban agriculture. So I oversee outreach in both of those areas, as well as help quite a bit with outreach in our forestry programs as well. So you know a little bit about the demographics of Detroit. The city is over 80% African American. The population is about 12% white, and that is inclusive of Arab Americans, and about 5% Latino. And a lot of people don't know this so much that the city is one of the most segregated communities in the country. It's actually more segregated than some say than South Africa during the height of the apartheid. So although we do have a little bit of racial diversity across the city, when you really look at neighborhoods, for example, the neighborhood that I live in called Mexican Town is over 80% Latino, and the population in the city is less than 5% Latino. So we do have a lot of segregation and ethnic communities that are living next to each other, but not so much integrated. In terms of our staff and our staff reflecting that population, we do have about 200 seasonal employees, both youth and adults, and those seasonal employees are really, really reflected in the population, very representative of the population. We have 24 full-time staff, including many AmeriCorps members, and the full-time staff is mostly representative of the population. The leadership of the organization, however, the full-time staff, the president and the directors, are not very representative. And so I think that's, one of my first key points is working in a diverse community, whether your organization is volunteer-run or you have paid staff, no matter the size, it really needs to consider if it's representative of the population that you're working in, and if it's not representative, if no one on your staff speaks the languages that are spoken locally, et cetera, I would highly recommend really looking at how you can diversify with leadership positions, the organization staff, to just really make sure that when you do outreach, people and you do meet new people and you make new contacts, that people see that the organization reflects something that they're familiar with and they're comfortable with, and is not completely foreign. Because a lot of times the language, environmentalism is something very new to people, and that message, that new message is really well received when it's received by someone that looks and feels familiar. The other thing about the organization is we work really, really hard. We have great programs and services, and we work really hard to attend as many community meetings and community events as possible throughout the year to tell people about our work and how we might be able to help them as individuals or as communities. And then from there, we really kind of have a policy where we only go where we're asked. So we are not, throwing a dart at a map and saying, or even, more diligently looking, for example, at maybe where a neighborhood has less tree cover than more tree cover. Those are all great variables. They all should be considered, but we're really only going into neighborhoods to do work when we're asked by the leadership of the neighborhoods, be it a community-based organization or a group of concerned citizens or a concerned citizen. So, it's definitely a principle and a practice of our organization is we only go where we're asked to go. From there, I guess I'll get into the story of Romanowski Park, which is a really good example of how we try to do our work. So I came on staff in 2003, and Romanowski Farm Park was one of the first projects that I worked on. It's a city park, about 30 acres in southwest Detroit, and it's located in a neighborhood that's adjacent to Dearborn, which has the largest Arab American population in the country. I think maybe there's one larger in California, but a very large Arab American population. And then it also has a very large Native American population, Latino population, and many Eastern European families living in the neighborhood since the 1930s and 40s. So whereas in Detroit, as far as Detroit is concerned, it's one of the most diverse communities that we have, and the park, the Romanowski Farm Park, was situated in a really great residential community with 2 schools adjacent to it. In 2003, it was 30 acres of grass. It was undeveloped. There were some mature trees. The kids in the adjacent schools were playing on a 6-foot rusty fence and 3 sewer tubes, like big cement tubes for their playground equipment. And aside from those things, that little infrastructure, it was 30 acres of grass. And much like I said before, the community, they asked us to come to the school to plant a few trees, and they got to know us a little bit better. They knew that we had undertaken and successfully implemented a number of larger major projects, and they asked us to come into the community and help them reclaim their park and turn it into something that could really be an asset for the community. And it's a 30-acre park, so it was kind of a big job, and we said we would consider doing that, but that we needed to get a broader base of stakeholders together. And so we worked with the school to identify other community-based partners like the American Indian Health and Family Services Center, the other adjacent school, Universal Academy, which is a charter school for Arab children, an organization called Access, the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services, Michigan State University Extension, Michigan State Horticulture Department, and a couple of Latino service, family service organizations as well. And together, we created a group of stakeholders, some youth, some adults, to come together and plan a very comprehensive outreach strategy for other partner organizations, but principally for the community that was living around the park. And this group met regularly for a number of months to kind of put together some ideas for how the park might be redeveloped, but more importantly, ideas about how we could, over a number of months, plan and implement a number of community engagement events that really it got to all of the different languages that were spoken, the ethnic groups that were in the neighborhood, the kids, the adults, and all the people who would eventually use and care for the park. And this group of key stakeholders did a number of, like I said, participatory planning events. We had a huge initial kickoff meeting where we flyered the entire neighborhood in English, Spanish, and Arabic flyers. We had about 300 residents come to the initial kickoff meeting, and the meeting was with few words. There was translation in English, Spanish, and Arabic, and there were some interactive activities that really, without speaking so much, allowed all of the stakeholder groups that were there to vote on some of the things that they would like to see happening in the park and infrastructure that they'd like the park to have in the future. And that information was collected and brought to the key planning group. And then we hosted a number of dream and design sessions with the school's youth with Play-Doh and pipe cleaners. The kids built the play equipment that they wanted to see in the park in the future. And then we had a third event using construction paper to scale soccer fields and to scale baseball fields and playgrounds, basically a planning charrette with adults and youth from the community where they told us how many baseball fields they'd like to see, how many soccer fields, how many trees, and we got a better sense of really what people were looking for the future of their park. And from there, we thought it would take about 5 years to do the fundraising for the park because they had really exciting things that they wanted to build, but very expensive things. And it took us, in fact, about 18 months to get together all of the funds to do the infrastructure improvements. And within within 2 years, we were planting our first garden, a new orchard. This is a photo of the kindergartners in first grade. In fact, all the students from the school helped plant the orchard with volunteers. It's 118 fruit trees with 13 different varieties. And you saw the first picture, the farm. It's about an acre of vegetables that are cultivated right in the center of the park that have no fences. There are also about 100 other mature trees that were planted, are a 2-inch caliber, so not very mature, but larger shade trees that were planted with help of Michigan State University. You see the guys on the ladder back there doing some measurements of the trees. They were able to plant the trees or help us plant the trees because they were part of a research project after the emerald ash borer hit the city. They were looking at what species and how they were planted to replace those trees that were lost in the quickest but best possible way. We engaged the kids in all aspects of planting the trees in the park and in doing the orchards and gardens there, and so they really felt like they were key stakeholders in the process. We also worked with the Latino Soccer League to build 3 adult soccer fields and 1 youth soccer field. We worked with the recreation department to do 3 basketball courts and 2 tennis courts. There's a mile walking trail, a new playground, and a learning pavilion as well. This young guy is learning about these black-eyed Susans and doing a little bit of art at the same time at the learning pavilion where we do nutrition education with about 300 students every week during the growing season. After-school programming includes a lot of family activities, and we've really come to know the park as a place not only where each of the major ethnic groups from the community gather, but now interact with one another in a more comprehensive and community way than they really had before they had a place like the park. So we have families, Latino families, Arab families, Eastern European, African American, white, Native American families all coming together to share meals, to garden together, to take care of trees, to pick fruit from the orchard. And as a part of the ongoing programming and really sharing of and blending of cultures, we do a lot of art together, a lot of music, and then of course, it's a place where a lot of activity is happening, and one of the things that we do to continually engage folks and really make sure that the life and vibrancy that has been brought to the park continues to really thrive is to do a lot of training both with the adults and families in the program or that live near the park in the nutrition programs and the orcharding and the care of the trees, but also in the nutrition education programs that we have during school. We do a lot of teacher training, and there's a number of teachers who, are kind of elbowing us out of the way at this point to take charge of leading the nutrition activities in the park every single week. So, kind of leaving you with, a suggestion for success when you have an ongoing investment, trees or gardens or the combination of the two, is that community engagement, really is ongoing. Building relationships is ongoing, and a lot of times, especially when you're working with a diverse community, you don't get it right the first time, or the second time, or the third time. So what we do is we try to really, start somewhere, engage key stakeholders, really reach out to partners and make sure that the leadership team, the folks that are making decisions about what programming looks like, where things get planted, are representative of the community, and come up with a broader engagement plan, bilingual flyers, school-based events, parties, whatever that might be, and really implement those engagement events as well as you can, as thoughtfully as you can, and see what happens. The previous presenter said, in one workshop that they had a lot of people, and there was, great participation. And then the second similar workshop, there were, fewer people than they would have liked. And you never really know, once you put the flyer out there and you schedule the event, what you're going to get. And so it's important to really at that point after the event to reevaluate and say, did we really see some new faces? Did we get some new people involved? Is it representative of the community? And, if any of the answers to those questions are no, then you really have to tweak your outreach strategies. Maybe it was the wrong time of the day. Maybe the meeting format wasn't, exactly comfortable for people. Maybe the presenter wasn't, the best and strongest person for the job. And so reevaluate where you're at and where you want to go and try something new, because community engagement is really never perfect. It's never finished. It's something that you have to work at, and part of that is really building trust and relationships in the community. Lastly, those trees that were being planted were planted in 2004, so 6 or 7, almost 7 years later. These are the same girls that were kindergartners at that time, and they've really come to not only see themselves as stewards of those trees, but as stewards of this community, and it does pay off in a big way.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ashley.
You're very welcome, Leland.
All right. I'm not cutting you off. You're 3, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Kathy, can we open up the lines for questions?
Once again, *1 to ask a question.
And again, I'll remind folks that you can type in your question over the web if you want to by clicking on the Q&A tab. Actually, I thought one of the really great points you brought up was during the participatory planning sessions that you had, the idea of sort of non-talking activities or activities that didn't require a ton of verbal communication. Could you just sort of recap that, just sort of some of the methods that you used or activities that people did, both?
Sure.
You said there were some for kids and some for adults.
Yep. I'll walk you through 3 of them. So in this case, we really wanted to know what people's vision for the future of the park was. And so the first activity we had with about 300 people, we put a number of elements that are photos of a number of elements that are typically found in a park up around the school's gymnasium. So we thought people, through our initial kind of leadership team, we thought people would want to see a playground there. It was adjacent to 2 schools that didn't have any playground equipment. So we put 12 different photos of playground equipment up on a board, and we gave everybody dots to see, so that they could vote at the photo that they really liked best. And from the number of dots, we could tell exactly which type of playground equipment, be it the colors, be it the scale, be it the size, be it the equipment that people were most interested in. We also had some reservations about whether certain farming and gardening and forestry things would be okay for people. So we had pictures of trees, we had pictures of gardens, we had pictures of things like beehives, and again we gave them votes to see which of those things that they really wanted to see in the park. We thought, for sure that people may be concerned about beehives, for example, but in fact they really, and really to some extent even gardens. We were concerned that people wanted to see gardens in the park, but the dots really showed us that people were very excited about having not only a well-landscaped park, but a beautiful garden or farm inside the park. The second thing that we did was a Dream and Design workshop with the students at the biggest school in the neighborhood, OW Homes, and so we had the entire school down in the cafeteria over the course of the day, and we gave them things like Play-Doh and pipe cleaners and art supplies, and they built in teams play equipment that they wanted to see in the park. So we knew, if they were really excited about swings or slides, or in a lot of cases the young boys skateboarding parks. But it gave us a lot of information to work with in terms of how we design the playground equipment and what playground equipment that we chose. And then finally we did a charrette, a planning charrette with families. We sort of began to know which elements people wanted to see in the park from the 2 previous events, but we didn't know how many and where at. And it turned out to be really quite important to put, for example, the basketball courts on the side of the park where there were fewer houses, because the houses, the homeowners of the houses were really concerned that the middle school and mostly high school boys that played basketball might get too rowdy or be a disruption, during the afternoon and evening. So that activity allowed both adults and youth to tell us, that they liked soccer fields more than baseball fields, and where they wanted them in the park, and how they connected to other elements that people were interested in seeing. So basically, all interactive, nonverbal activities that were really great for both the youth and adults, that gave us a ton of information.
Awesome. That's a really cool idea.
Forward.
We've got a quick question over the line or over the internet. Did your organization still coordinate the maintenance of the elements of the park?
So no, not all of the elements of the maintenance of the park. It was really important, again, that we engaged a number of partners in the planning process as well as in programming, ongoing programming. It's a 30-acre park with a lot of moving parts and a really diverse neighborhood, and there's just no way that our organization, even though we're a fairly large organization, can commit to all of the ongoing programming and maintenance. So from the very beginning, we had the Latino Soccer League at the table, and the Latino Soccer and World Soccer Leagues at the table, and they now are primarily maintaining the soccer fields that take up, a third of the park. We had the recreation department at the table. They're, doing all of the lawn mowing at the park. We had the Native American Health and Family Services Organization. They do an herb garden at the park, and a number of other arts and human service organizations help with other programming. Sometimes during our after-school programs. Sometimes they sponsor programming on their own.
Okay, Kathy, do we have any questions over the line?
We do have a question on the phone lines. The name was not recorded, but your line is open, and you may ask your question. Please check your mute button.
Yeah, hi there. Great presentation. We were wondering how you were able to get 300 people to that meeting. That's incredible.
That's a great question.
Yeah, can you hear me? Professor Yin is really well known. There's a website he has. He travels internationally. How we actually landed him, it took months in his traveling schedule to months out before he actually was able to come. He made overhead presentations of really cool sketches of cartoonic pictures of trees and how to bless them and channel chi, really fun stuff. How did we get, it's his name, it's his following, quite honestly. It's a religious sect of Buddhism that follows him, knows him. He has publications. Yeah, really amazing. We've never had anything that large a turnout that's not a planting.
And Ashley, I think you had an event that got nearly that many people as well, right?
Yes. And the way that we really started was recruiting through schools. We had a lot of times there's so much hidden leadership in schools that you don't necessarily know is there if you're not in the building every day. Lots of either teachers or teachers' aides, our parents in the neighborhood are really well connected to the parents, and they're very representative of the student body and of the community. And so we looked at the local leaders within the school, and we asked them, and delegation is key. Delegate, delegate, delegate. We delegated responsibility to every single person that would accept some. The leaders within the school were responsible for translating flyers, distributing flyers in the classroom level, and then they actually went door to door with us to every single household within walking distance of the park. And if we saw people on the porches, we had people that spoke the language that they speak at home with us to, really engage in thoughtful conversation. We also utilize those community partners who have tons of relationships within the communities as well, and we got the kids excited through things like, playing with with Play-Doh and doing the dream and design. The kids got really excited about the possibility of the park being renovated and went home and told their moms and dads that they really wanted them to be there.
All right, these are fantastic questions and really good answers from both of you. I appreciate your time, and I want to let people know that even though we're going to wind things down here, that I guess I shouldn't speak for you guys, but I'm pretty sure that Doug, Greg, and Ashley would be happy to answer your questions if you have other thoughts about these topics. I want to let everyone know that the presentation, recording of it, and also a related resource list will be available in about 1 week, and Alliance for Community Trees will email the link to those things to everyone who takes a minute to complete this brief survey right here. We'd really appreciate that. It helps us to understand what you're looking for so that we can program webcasts and sessions that are of interest to you and cover the topics you want to know about. Our next webcast is Tree Technology Part 2, CRMs, that stands for Constituent Relationship Management. It's a new technology that's becoming much more popular with nonprofits and city governments, and that's going to be on October 7th. I want to say a big thank you to our presenters today, Greg, Doug, and Ashley. Really appreciate all the great stories and advice that you doled out to everyone who listened, and thanks to everyone who listened, all our participants. We hope you will come back and listen to our next webcast session on the 7th. And, of course, a big thank you to our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, Leland.
Thanks, Leland.
Thank you. This concludes today's conference call. You may disconnect at this time.